If I could have your attention for just a moment. I want to ask you to go ahead and get you something to eat, and don't stop eating just because we're starting to talk. Get some coffee or something to drink or whatever you wish. My name is Louise McCann, and I'm not really sure how I got involved in this, but I have got involved in it. I am with Dunwoody homeowners, and we're delighted to have such a great turnout today. A while back, Sue Ellen Mears said to me, we need to video the history of Dunwoody. And I thought that was such a terrific idea because we have great history up here and we're going to lose it. And so that is the purpose of this day, to remember Dunwoody. Where's Rob? Our current president of Dunwoody homeowners is Rob Augustine, and Nick Nicodemus is, where's Nick? He served 2 long terms, and there he is. All the members of Dunwoody Homeowners Board, I'd like you just to raise your hand or stand up and let us see you, because this group works real hard for the community, and I know a lot of you are not familiar with us. Sue Ellen, you're from the Historical Society. Would you like to say something?
Sure, always. Louise does know how she got into this, because I asked her to. What we try to do with the DeKalb Historical Society is go out into the community and learn about the history and video it for our archives. That's what our role is to preserve and collect and disseminate the history of our county. Our founder, Jamie Mackey, a former congressman from the 4th District, continues to say, history matters and it scatters. And I think when we look around us, we know how quickly that happens. And I, as the director of the Historical Society, and my board are very, very invested in this community and wanting to have a semblance of the pieces of the community as much as we can keep in place. And a lot of times when I go to speak to youth groups and to school groups, one of the things I think about is how, for some of us, to be able to take our children or our grandchildren back to where we went to school or back to where we hung out with our friends is not going to be possible. And so many of the ways we keep that is through our photographs and our memorabilia and to video people who can remember what it used to be like. And that's what this is about. And what it continues to do from our perspective is to tie us together as a community. We're an awfully big county, but Dunwoody is a vital part of the county, and as we can continue to share our history with each other, then we can keep connected. So I'm very grateful to Louise for being willing to take on this project for us, and also to the Homeowners Association for your support. And I'd like to introduce the president of the board for the Historical Society, Lynn Minnie, who is back here. And do you want to say anything?
You said it all here.
Thanks. So again, thank you for being here. It's going to be a lot of fun. What we find out a lot of times as we're doing these programs is once the audience gets started too, it grows and expands. And so please let this be a participatory activity where we can all share what we remember. And thanks for being here. And thank you, Louise.
Okay. I had written to Miss Ethel Sproul here, which you know, and Monjay Davis and several of you to be prepared to talk a little bit. And I'm going to let you sit over here so this video man can get you. And I'm going to let you begin. And David Chestnut, I saw David come in.
He's right here.
That would be great. They could sit in. And David, you know the history too. But David, come on up here with me.
Not for that kind of abuse. I have to tell you, you're ready to go.
Mr. Alston, yes, Lynn Alston. Kathleen Sproul. We'd like to get several of you up here, and then we'll get started with 2 or 3, and then we're going to get comments from everybody before the day is over. Mr. Davis, come on up here. We're just going to get started, and we're going to talk. Mr. Davis, right here. Who's going to go first? me, I don't need
Steve Kirby?
God. That's Budweiser. I don't know what you call it.
I didn't prepare.
Come on and sit down
Yeah, well,
anyway. Sit down.
Sit down, Glenn. Okay. Sit here. Okay.
Max has been here a long time too.
All of them, get started.
Margaret said to tell you about shout out to her.
Hi, sir.
Doing well? Good. She's doing real good.
Okay.
Good.
Well, we'll get it all in here by the end of the day. Would you like to get started and talk a little bit, Miss Ethel, about when you first came to Dunwoody and what you know about it? All of that, get us started.
How long you want me to talk?
Well, we all came here and saw the railroad house.
Tell them about Nash's store, Miss Ethel.
Shall I stand or sit?
Whatever's comfortable.
Well, I am Ethel Warren, and I came to Dunwoody to live in 1933, February the 7th. It was real rural, and I came and spent my honeymoon rambling in the woods because we had this terrible, terrible snow. So I don't think I have to speak a long time about the growth of Dunwoody because the young people have seen the growth. But we had the one school on the top of the hill, and it was muddy. And Steve and Sue was one of the teachers. Now, as far as the railroad, I think it had ceased in the late 20s. But everybody knew their neighbor. There was a great love, a great unity. And the expansion has been so great. I was a Baptist, but my family, the Sproles, were all Methodists. So I was converted into the Methodist church. There was growth of about 100 and the attendance around 50. And the growth has been, now the Dunwoody Methodist Church has around 3,000 members. Growth, progress. And we have become a metropolitan Atlanta of all our business growth. But due to Stephen holding on to the land, maybe we wouldn't have a perimeter or a North Point. So I'm sure my 2 minutes are up and over. After living out here 62 years.
Mr. Davis, when did you move here? You've lived here all your life, or just about, haven't you?
No, I lived half my life before I came here. Good going, man.
When did you move here?
We moved here in 36, I believe, 36 or 37. After Ethel had been here a few years.
Right.
3 years. I was born over here at Marietta, not very far away. But I grew up in the country on a farm in northwest Georgia, a little town named Cave Spring. It's on the road to Alabama out of Georgia. And I was always a country boy. And when I worked in Atlanta, I had to stay away from the country. But I always hoped to get back to it. And we would drive out on Sunday afternoon and see some country sights. And at one point, we got into the Dunwoody area. And Mr. Calhoun Spruill, who was a cousin, I believe, of Stephen, he had a sign up for sale on acreage down the road. And I was attracted to that sign and promptly met Calhoun Spruill, and we came to an agreement, and I was able to borrow enough money to buy a few acres out here. And when I was in the building and loan office where I borrowed the money, somebody in there said, when you get to Dunwoody, don't ever say anything bad about anybody there. They're all related. So the Wommats and the Spruills and named about half a dozen families. He said they're all intermarried, and if you say something bad about one of them, you'll be in bad with all of them. So I have never said anything bad about any of them because there never was anything bad to say about them. We moved out and started in a old farmhouse that had vertical 12-inch boards with 4-inch strips over them. And we lived in that house till we could get it weatherboarded, got the weatherboarding changed, and still live in that house. And it's been a wonderful experience to move here. The family, my family in Decatur was in the Presbyterian Church. And we first considered driving back to Decatur every morning to go to the Sunday school and church at the Presbyterian Church. But that was too much, and so we joined the Methodists. And we had a wonderful church in Dunwoody all these years.
When did Ms. Davis become the principal or start teaching at the school? Because all my life she was the principal of Dunwoody School.
Well, soon after we moved here, she called the county, DeKalb County
36 or 37,
registration office, and she said the teachers out here are not, the teachers are fine, but the school is not a good school. You want me to have to drive my children back to Decatur to school? And he said, well, first, the principal was a minister, a Methodist minister without a church, and he was teaching till he got into a church. So the superintendent said to Elizabeth, why don't you just take the school? We need a new principal, and the office is now open. So as a result of that conversation, she became principal of Dunwoody Elementary School for 25 years. And she knew all the children by name, and she knew their parents. And if a child misbehaved or had to have correction, she would take the child in a car to the child's home and talk to his parents. And that was her method of discipline.
Mr. Davis, where is your home streets-wise?
It's on Chamblee-Dunwoody Road.
Okay.
Right across the road.
Right across the road. Mr. Davis is still right across the road.
I didn't realize that was your home, sir.
Tell them about anything you lost. It was always at school.
Yeah, Ethel reminded me that when Elizabeth was principal, all we had, this was the school. When she was principal, she would take my tools and all my personal belongings, chairs and beds and everything. I said, first time I come home and my bed is over at the school, I'm quitting. That never happened. She was a great, wonderful person. And
Tell them about after she retired, our writing of the book. After she retired, we wrote the book, The Story of Dunwoody.
After Elizabeth retired from the school life, she joined up with Ethel and they wrote this book, The Story of Dunwoody, which was published in 1986, I believe.
876.
About mid-80s. And it's had three printings. And Elizabeth and Ethel went around over the county, borrowed pictures from different people that had pictures of Dunwoody, some of the Dunwoody bells and bows that entered into the history of Dunwoody. And they compiled a book, The Story of Dunwoody.
Is that the one that's on the table?
Uh-huh.
And how much does it cost?
15, and Miss Ethel said she'd be glad to sign it for anyone who wished to purchase one.
And this is the Elizabeth Davis storytelling room, so Elizabeth was the principal, and this is the old Dunwoody Elementary School, and I guess she continues to live in this room, so it's very appropriate that we be here today in this room, I think.
What you really need to keep in mind is, in those days, we had only one high school in the north end of the county. That was Chamblee High School, and the high school and the elementary school were in the same building, and we only had one principal that was Prof. Smith, Mr. M.E. Smith. All the students from the first grade to the seniors never referred to him as anything but Prof. And look around, there's a lot of people that graduated there. And my daddy and myself, and I know Glenn and my aunt graduated together there. But that high school fed from Dunwoody, Dorable, where the Mr. Bickers was his son's a doctor in town, was the principal. Chamblee, of course, Brookhaven. So there were 4 elementary schools that fed the high school, and
Cross Keys.
Well, Cross Keys was not built until J. Foster Gooseby, who succeeded Prof, came in. The first school that was built was Sexton Woods Elementary School, and they moved the elementary portion of the Chamblee Elementary over to Cross Keys. To Sexton Woods, and then that became a total high school. And then in 1960 or 61, they opened up Cross Keys, which was the second high school in this area. And then later on in the 60s, they did Sequoia, and then Peachtree came into existence. But that's kind of the chronology. But at the time, it was Dunwoody, Dorable. I forget the name of the person that was at Brookhaven, but.
Well, now, David, before then, they had small schools like just Chestnut Ridge up here, Spalding, and then they had one at Morgan Fall and that was in the early 1800s.
Right.
And then these larger schools, when we became private, not private school, what were the schools? Public schools. Mm-hmm. That's when Chamblee and Brookhaven and all, and Dunwoody was built.
David, we've got a gentleman with us, Gordon Wallace over here, who was there. He graduated from Chamblee High School by 1923. 26. Born in Chamblee 85 years ago.
Right.
I think it would be interesting for everybody to raise your hand if you graduated from Chamblee High School.
Oh my goodness.
So there are quite a few of us.
What years did you hear that one?
Lord, when did you graduate? Yes, in 26. Who graduated before?
She was one of our teachers at the Dunwoody Elementary.
Well, maybe she could tell some stories on some of these people. Because I'm sure they were not all at Methodist Church all the time.
You talking about stories, I think one of my favorite stories of growing up in this area, and this, you have to understand, this is in the early 50s. Earl Donaldson, and the house that we live in is his great-grandfather's house. His grandfather lived on Vermac there, along about where the road from Parliament Way comes across. Moved there in 1935 to settle, and when my house was sold to settle his granddaddy's estate, and Mr. William T. is buried out there in the backyard. But the Earl and I had been, we rabbit hunted a lot, and we had been losing the dogs down in the swamps where Murphy Candler Park is. So we skipped school one afternoon and cut out early, about right after lunch, and went home, got our shotguns, and went by the Longs and picked up their dogs and got my dogs and went and got Earl's dogs, and we had a pretty good pack of hounds, and went back over there because we knew where to jump this one rabbit that would go down the swamp, so we were going to kill him because he was learning our rabbit hunting. And Earl had an older brother, and there were several older guys, and we were going to be the heroes. We were going to get this one big buck rabbit. So the dogs got back in the swamps, and we went in the swamps after them like our plan was, and we ended up somewhere on the other side of the Murphy, where the Murphy Candler Park is, because all the ball fields down there was swamps and honeysuckles. And we ended up not too far from red spruils. That's Carrie. I never knew him anything. What?
Carrie or Ewell?
Ewell. I never knew him as anything but Mr. Red.
Ewell.
That was Ewell, and not too far from his cornfield. And it's dark, there was old houses back in there, so we called the dogs in, got a great big pile of pine straw, and covered up and pulled the dogs around us. And about 4 o'clock that morning, my daddy and Mr. Spruill found us. They had the whole north end of the county out looking for us. And we were somewhere along behind where Montgomery School is, back in the woods. If that gives you some idea about how, how it was. And there was nothing between the creek, actually there's nothing between what is now Harts Mill Road and Mount Vernon. I mean, it was nothing, there was no development in there. You could shoot any one direction, didn't have to worry about, hitting anything. And this was in the mid-1950s.
Oh my goodness.
Road.
What a police.
Glenn, when did you and Marguerite graduate? I know there's some stories, there's 2 or 3 stories I hadn't gotten the truth of yet. Maybe
Okay, I'm gonna stand up. Give y'all a hope that I'm not here long. Yes, Marguerite and I were in class together at Chamblee. And we had a 28 Chevrolet, 4 doors, but no windows, at the top. And we would get a big night with us to go to a pool on the other side of Chamblee, and we were cruising down through there, and Marguerite had her foot out where it shouldn't have been. Hanging out, leg, and we hit a tree. She hit a tree. And so she was badly injured, not too badly, but that was one of the stories. While I'm up, I'll just say a couple of things. I've been here, I'm 73 and I've been here 66 years living here, and I'm still a member of the church up here. I think it was a close community the years that I remember. I know that rarely anyone ever moved into the area, and it was quite conservative. And there was a couple who eventually married, and the way they courted was he drove in the front seat and she sat in the back seat. And but somehow they got together. We never saw that part, but they got together. Now, in contrast to that, when Margie and Elizabeth came out here in the early 30s. They really showed us the way. They cruised down the road, and there was still room on the right side for 2 people. She was in his lap with her arm around him, you know, and the town really did talk. But that's right. What?
Shame on you.
Okay. I would just say that, my father, when he came here and married my mother, they made 2 or 3 decisions. One was if they ever had any children, they'd all have a chance for a college education. Well, they didn't have an idea they'd have 6, but they worked it out anyway, because the older ones helped with the college, and it worked out, kept the promise. She taught school over the course of 50 years here. Only thing breaking up was the very birth of children. And I think that in school is an awful problem, because Eddie, my poor little brother, and I, we got in more trouble because they would go, Ms. Austin, Eddie did this and Glenn did that, and we were always wrong. Really were always wrong. And the kids knew that, so they gave us a hard time. I do remember the railroad cut. I used to chase baseballs, the Dunwoody Diamond, where the Amoco Station. It was a piece of our property with 15 acres there. And the backstop was right there against the road cut. Ran up to first base, ran down to second base, level from second to third, and it was kind of cruising from third home. And little kid, I thought it was the greatest thing to chase those balls down that railroad cut and over down the railroad toward the corner house there. And my parents would let me do that. When you got 66 years of it, or something like that, you have a hard time. And maybe a question or two y'all might have of me.
And where did you live when you lived here as a boy?
We lived, our property started at Ashford Dunwoody on the right, about right there. It went all the way up to the county line, just about on the right, Fulton County. And it was an angle, 45 acres there. I was born in a house right across from the chapel at the church in 1920. And then we lived on the property on the right going down. The old home place site is still there, but been remodeled, and the Baptist church has that. My late brother John's house was torn down, and ours was torn down when we sold to the church for a great project, but it never worked out. It was going to be a home for the elderly. But I lived right there. Then for 37 years, the greenhouse on the right, sitting down there in the woods, first house on the right, heading toward Sandy Spring. What else? Anything?
Did this property include Austin Elementary School, where that is, or?
No.
When did Nash's store get built?
That's picture Nash's story.
I don't know that it was moved up from down south Dunwoody. I guess it's south. It was moved. It's more or less the depot, and it was moved up there. Became Nash Grocery, the post office there. You get gas there, and let's see. I was gonna say something about that.
And the school was named for your mother.
Yes, and the way it happened, we knew, and someone was going out for it, Miss Elizabeth Davis, and it worked toward it, and we did one thing we thought that was perfectly in order, our whole family, because she was the latest principal. But right at the last, and we didn't know a thing about it, I was called out at Rich's and said, John Ramsey, who was our rep here, Glenn, and how many of your family can be in Decatur tonight? I said, I don't know. I think I can, and what's going on? He said, we're going to name the school for your mother. Well, that's the first we knew about it, but when we found out it could not be named for someone alive, Elizabeth Davis says, well, it ought to be Nettie Austin. So that's how that happened. It was just a matter of a few hours or something going on there for us. I went down that night.
Could you tell us somewhat about the old cemetery that's on Chamblee-Dunwoody Road there to the right, just past the village? Is that a family cemetery?
Mother, tell them about this thing.
It was, there was a church in front of the cemetery originally, but the church disbanded. It was a Primitive Baptist church, but it was known as a community cemetery. We used to live next door to it, and I was, and it's always been a community cemetery from that point on, and still is.
I think that cemetery has been used for burial as recently as the last 5 years.
Wait, and last 2 years.
The last time I checked. So it's still actively used.
There is a fund going, and it's a continual thing. There's enough money, and people give yearly to keep the fund going, to keep it clean.
What's the name of it?
Brother could tell you, he's
What's
in charge
the name
of it.
Right, Miss Max, okay.
What did you want to know?
The name of the cemetery.
The cemetery.
Well, the Dunwoody Cemetery is located just down north of here, I guess it is. And it's adjacent to our old home place. And I got elected for a 2-year term as a part of the cemetery trustee about 10 years ago. And I still had another election. So I'm stuck with it, I guess. One interesting thing when we talk about the school I'd like to share with y'all. Nobody has mentioned Miss Chambers. She was one of the teachers at the school. And Miss Chambers had a reputation. Anybody misbehaved, boy, you got your teeth shook out. She'd grab you by the shoulder, shake you so hard you think your head is coming off. But one interesting thing I remember about Miss Chambers was that we had a devotional every Monday morning. Of course, you couldn't do that in schools now. They wouldn't let you, wouldn't allow it. But she'd make every one of us sing, "Yield not to temptation, for yielding is sin." I still remember every word of that thing. But that was one of the most interesting things I remember about Dunwoody School. Another important thing that was always fascinating us kids was that you get to go get water. Because they had running water in the old school. And we had to go over in Cheek's pasture and go to the spring, get a bucket of water. And boy, that was a favorite thing, to get to go get a bucket of water. She'd always appoint 2 people that hadn't misbehaved usually that day, go get a bucket of water. Well, she could trust them maybe. But we had some wonderful times over Dunwoody School. About the cemetery, we still have a fund that we try to keep up the cemetery. We have done pretty good on it, but it's had very successful people making donations, and we have a fellow that cleans it usually 3 times a year. And so that helps out. We used to try to just meet and everybody help clean it up, but that got to where it was kind of a chore to get people together. So now we have this one fellow that does that.
Can you tell us what families are buried in that cemetery?
Not really.
Oh.
The Kirbys, the Spruills, the Carpenters, Copelands, Andersons, Donaldsons, Lauren, my mother. Yeah, Lawrence. Yeah. Mannix. There's quite a few of the local.
And y'all have just about named everybody that lived in Dunwoody.
Dunwoody sounds like.
Just about. Cheeks, yeah.
Yep.
I could keep on talking about Dunwoody School, but I thought I'd wait for somebody else to talk.
Mr. Kirby, why don't you tell them about the well? You were telling us about a public well?
Oh yeah, the public well used to be down here in the forks of the road. I wish that I had had a picture of that, kept that thing, but I don't. I do have a picture of the old Dunwoody store if anybody wants to see it.
And I have a picture of the school.
You have a picture of the school?
Oh, super.
So, the well, we used to walk to school, of course. That was unusual. grammar school kids had to walk, high school kids could ride the bus. But we couldn't ride the bus. Thank you. And we always enjoyed walking home. There's always 4 or 5 of us going the same direction. We'd usually come out across the road from the schoolhouse and go up the old railroad cut that Glenn mentioned a while ago. That was a thrill to walk up that thing. But we'd always get to the public well in front of Nash's store. We had to draw us a fresh bucket of water. And we had a little old gourd stayed there, and everybody drank out the same gourd. You know about sanitation back then. Here's a picture of Nash's old store if anybody wants to see it closer.
Oh, that's wonderful, from old capitalism.
Were there any other stores out here other than Nash's?
Yeah, they had 3 stores when we were going to grammar school down there. There was Nash's, Barrett Mayfield's are right in the Forks Road there, and just above them, the Burns store. That was prosperous town back then, really.
That's marvelous picture. You preserved that very
Do you remember the gin that used to be up here?
Yeah, the old cotton gin, yeah, it was there on the corner.
It blew up, you know,
Yeah.
it had a steam generator.
Yeah.
I had a auto that was killed.
What was his name, Tom?
Manning.
Manning? Which Manning was that now? I remember that.
Well, let's see, I'm trying to remember, there's a bunch of Mannings that you know.
Tom, why don't you stand up? Tell us a little bit.
Yeah. You can have a floor up through there.
My mother went to school here. She was born in 1892, and she was a lawyer. And her father had a 60-acre farm just down the road, Mount Vernon Way. And during the Depression, everybody couldn't pay the rent around here, to pay it, so they lost it. But my mother went to school here, and it was a 3-room school. And she got water out of the spring drains back there. And my grandfather buried in this cemetery down here. And I got a couple of sisters buried down too. But my father met my mother. He was a railroad man from Atlanta. And he used to come over on this railroad. Came up here to see a friend one time. And he introduced her to my mother at that time. And they married. And they lived here a while, but they finally moved to Ross, and that's why I was in the place. But I've been back here since 1965. You know, this train used to come all the way over to Roslyn, but it turned around and went back this way.
Back up.
And I had 7 brothers and sisters. One of them was born down here. I was one of Roslyn. So that's
The train went from Atlanta to Roswell by way of Dunwoody?
Chamblee.
From Chamblee.
Spur. Ran from Chamblee to Roswell, back. It didn't turn around over there. There's no turn.
There was no turntable.
It never crossed the river, Chetty River.
Ended through Roswell
It
Road.
ended right at the bridge.
And there's a house up there that faces the wrong way on Roberts Drive at Roswell, and that was the engineer's home. Remember that? And it faces the wrong direction from the road, and that's because he had to watch where the train was parked on night. And then he'd back up down to Chamblee with it. Oh.
Mr. Wallace wrote a interesting article for the Gaslight newspaper on the history of Chamblee, because I used it as a reference when I was writing paper in high school. And you correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Wallace, but when they submitted the charter for Chamblee, they submitted it as the name of it to be Roswell Junction. And the postal department or whoever it was that approved those things would not approve Roswell Junction because of the confusion that it would have made. So they asked for permission to take the name of one of the signers of the petition. And they chose the name of a black section hand by the name of Chamblee, and that's how that town got its name.
Oh, see, that's very interesting.
Isn't that correct, Mr. Wallace?
That's right.
However, there is a controversy about it. There was also a prominent citizen in Norcross by the name of Chamblee, who was involved with the railroad, and it's never been resolved.
That was probably some of his relatives.
Well, I'd just like to say that I don't remember the train, but I came shortly after the train stopped running. I was born down in the General Dunwoody old house down on Chamblee-Dunwoody, where the Redfield tennis courts and swimming pool are today. And if you can picture Dunwoody back then, There were not very many, if any, paved streets. Very few automobiles. And from where we lived down on Ashford-Dunwoody, there was no bus to take the children to school. You got to school the best way you could. Thank goodness we had a good school. When I attended Dunwoody, there were 3 teachers. Glenn's mother, Mrs. Nettie Austin, had grades 1, 2, and 3. And she would let some of the older people in the 3rd grade hear the reading from the 1st grade. So I got to do that pretty often. But it was fun. And of course, Mrs. Chambers, when I went, taught 4th and 5th grade. And if you can imagine a teacher now having that many lesson plans, of course, I don't guess they did lesson plans way back then. And then Mrs. Davis was my teacher at Dunwoody, and she taught me 6th and 7th grade, and as well as being principal of the school. And Francis Sproul's mother, husband's mother, Miss Ola Sproul, was the first lady who had our lunchroom at Dunwoody. And that lady would cook for the whole school. Now you can imagine, we weren't very large, so it's not, just try to imagine small things then. But we had a good time, and it's been fun to see Dunwoody grow. And I would just like to say that we had genuine people way back then, and we have genuine people in Dunwoody today.
We always worked in unity.
Okay.
Miss Sproul, when you first came here,
And Kathleen and women.
can you hear me? Miss Sproul,
Miss Ethel.
He's asking you a question.
do you know where, when you first came here, Mount Vernon Road was Lawrenceville Road on the east side and Sproul Street on the west side?
No, it was Mount Vernon
And already
and
been changed?
Ashford Dunwoody when I came.
Do you know, does anyone here know where the name Mount Vernon came from?
The family of Ashford, the old home place is still standing. It's called the Ashford Club, down there at the end of Peachtree and Overthorpe.
But how was Mount Vernon named?
I think it was named from Mount Vernon. I can't think of the person who bought Arlington Cemetery, and it was named for Mount Vernon in Virginia. It is hard for you people, you new people and homeowners, to think how rural this area was. And the only reason Elizabeth and myself wanted to write a book of Dunwoody because the heritage was being lost, and most every other community had a book, and why shouldn't Dunwoody?
I have another old map that shows Mount Vernon
But-
West as being Patience
As
Ferry
you
Road.
know, all of the roads are named for old settlers, and I could name them. But when I came, we only had, the only social events was Mr. Kellogg. He would, on 4th of July, he would always have some event of a picnic or climbing a greasy pole or something. But we did have, at the end of school, we would have these spelling matches.
What a party.
And when I came to Dunwoody from Atlanta, we had very, very few church suppers, and I don't know why they named me president of everything, but I was a leader, and we needed leaders at that time. And it was David's mother that helped us, and the Donaldsons, and always helped, and it was always a benefit dinner. And we would go out to someone would promise a chicken, and sometimes we'd have to go out and chase the chicken up. Take it home and dress the chicken. So it's been quite an eventful time and to see the growth of Dunwoody and all of the fine leaders.
Is your family connected with Chestnut Drive?
Which one?
The one over in the Chestnut Drive.
Yeah, it runs between Buford Highway and Chamblee-Tucker.
Yeah.
Yes, that's my grandfather's farm was.
And there's an old Chestnut home over there.
That's right. That's my
my
grandfather, David Gladney Chestnut.
Right.
He was a friend of my husband.
The Chestnuts went all the way from basically over on Tilly Mill, all the way, they kind of stretched out across to Tucker. Miss Ethel was related to my grandmother, who was a Warren, and they lived, their home place is the J.W. Warren home place is still standing right across from Warren School. As a matter of fact, it's a foster child of my two aunts. I had two aunts. One taught third grade at Chamblee for 40 years, Aunt Abby. And then she had Eva, who was a nurse, worked for the county extension service. And they reared two foster children. Both of them were old maids. They reared two foster children, and Joe Reese still lives who's, just like a child who still lives in that house. And he inherited it when Aunt Abby died. But that's where, I lived on Chamblee-Dunwoody at the corner of Hart's Mill, which was then Sexton Road, was where I grew up.
Well, I have known Dunwoody since I was about 9 years old. My father had an old Maxwell, and we would come to visit the Warrens, the Armsteads, and then my father would bring parents of the boys that were going overseas to at Camp Gordon.
I really ought not to tell you this, but it'd be a shame for the Historical Society not to get this in their records. The map that he showed you, or the calendar with Nash's store, which is the Amoco Station up here. My father ended up owning that piece of property at one time, and he sold it to Amoco for $20,000 and thought he had cut a fat hog in the hand. If that gives you some idea, and that would have been in the late 1950s. If it gives you some idea, you couldn't buy that corner from Amoco now for $2 million. But that's where the price, and Daddy got every penny that place was worth when he sold it.
Yeah, but David, the Nash store was in a dwelling down there before.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And that was the depot where the train.
Right. That's correct. And it was. Daddy ended up with it because of the same thing that Mr. Manning's talking about. The times got hard and payments couldn't be made, and they kind of cut a deal, and he sold the gas and collected rent based on the amount of gas that was sold to him.
Dave, I asked Mr. Davis, he mentioned that when he purchased his property for home, what did residential property sell for?
Well, Mr. Davis, how much you pay for your place?
I can't remember, something like 8,000.
But how many acres do you have with it?
63 acres.
63 acres in the house.
Land out here in 1933, somewhere around in there, was around $25 to $30 an acre. Right out Mount Vernon, not half a mile from the
I wanted to ask, but other than David out here running rabbits in what's now Murphy Camden, there's a ballpark over here. Was that all your recreation between rabbits and baseball? And what'd y'all do out here?
Well, we had a lot of fun.
I'm sure you did. What?
I mean, well, you got
Well, you
to...
can put in recording today. It's all
Well, I was fixing to say, you got to understand that you could turn a child loose, and there really wasn't a whole lot that we fished Peachtree Creek, and you just come home with supper with brim that came out of the creek down there. That was not unusual at all. But we played baseball. There was a big, and Bill Amoco can tell you more about this than I can, but there was Bud Cruz, and this was in the 40s and 50s, shortly after the war. This big baseball town up here, Dunwoody in particular, because Bud Cruz ran a kind of a semi-pro baseball team that was all of the best high school and college players. Bud was a house painter, but really wanted to be a baseball manager and was. Bill, I think you were involved in some of that, weren't you?
No, not really. No, I was not involved in the baseball part.
Well, Bill, you've been out here a long time. Let's hear a few words out of you.
Well, I don't think I can say anything that hadn't been said.
But David, I think we shouldn't forget
lived out here
the
on
great part that we
Here's
played
Baldwin
in
Drive.
Chamblee, Camp Gordon.
Oh, I guess I came here in '39, and we lived down in Dunwoody Place, I guess it is now. And,
soldiers.
old
And
Robert's
then
Drive, and
the
old
part
house
we
down
played
there
in
burned.
part.
So we moved up here to Cass County, which was just across Spalding. And I stayed there until we built, we hadn't gone very far. Right now, the house I'm in is about 100 yards from where I live in. Where the church is now, the church is next door to me. Church of Christ. Yeah.
Well, the social function out here in Dunwoody long years ago were the two churches. I mean, the social life was about the church. Well, we had the church, yeah, Ebenezer and the Baptist Church and the Methodist Church, and those were the three churches.
Well, even when I came along in the 40s and 50s, if you had the youth groups, I mean, they have youth groups now and they have them all playing, but the whole community, we went to the Presbyterian Church in Dorwell, but any time that the Dunwoody Methodist group had a party, we all went to the Dunwoody Methodist group. Anytime the Chamblee Methodist group had a party, we all went there. And if you had a friend that went to that church, he may take, or she may take 5 or 6 people. So even though the churches themselves were relatively small, the youth events, and that was all the social life that there were you might have 50, 60 children at a party or an event that was planned by, well, you said we didn't go to Bible study groups, but we went to parties.
Glenn, what were you going to say?
I hesitate to bring it up, but my dad, my mother gets kind of credit for a lot of things, and maybe should, and we hesitate to talk about the family, but my dad was a carpenter. He was in the church, did a lot of work there, and a farmer. But he peddled groceries down Peachtree Street in a covered wagon. And Roswell Road was mud at that time, or dust, one or the other, And he gathered it up from all the community. But one of the first things he did after marriage was buy a set of law books, because he sensed the need in Dunwoody for someone to know a little bit about law. And so he was a justice of peace about 31 years, I believe.
He called him judge.
They called him judge, and somebody ran against him one time and got 2 votes. I think that, not that he was that good, I don't mean that, but it's good. Now, Nash grocery stores, there's where he held court. I guess when problem arose, maybe no definite schedule. But I do remember Judge Clarence Peeler from Decatur, told a story, and I'm not mention names, so I'd be deep trouble, but he had told court one day, there was a father and a son. The father said, "This is my dog." The son says, "This is my dog." So my dad had to listen him out, and he awarded the dog to the father. The son went down to the house, got a shotgun, went over where Mr. Will Donaldson was keeping the dog, and shot him dead. So that was, just Peter tells that story. I think it could have happened.
Glenn,
Yeah.
let me tell you something about your daddy. We were living in Dunwoody when the lights came on, when the power company ran a line through, and everybody got an electric light bulb in for their front porch. And somebody said that the first night, I think it was a Saturday, that we got the lights turned on. Somebody said, "Well, Mr. Glenn Austin sat out on the front porch and fanned that light all night long, trying to get it to go out."
That's what he went to law school for.
I don't think he really did it.
What year did you get electricity? Do you remember at all what year that would have been? What year would that have been?
Where I went.
What year?
Oh, well, let me go back into ancient history. I think my daddy and mom looked in the market bulletin and found a farm for sale well, it didn't have a name, but it was where Spalding and Pitts Road connected, out in the country. 3-room house for sale, 40 acres of land. That sounded good to them because my daddy had to leave the post office at Marble Hill because his health was bad. The doctor told him to get outside. So they bought a farm. They didn't know anything about farming, and their 5 children didn't either. But we put out things, they did, put out things on the train at Marble Hill, and we moved by train, came down to Atlanta, back to Chamblee, and then back on the little road that went from, a little railroad from Chamblee to Roswell, to the river, did go across. And that was called Power Station. I think that in the history that you find in the book, the Kirby family, all of this is written down. But anyway, that's where we lived when we first came here. It was the first whistle stop past the Dunwoody Station. But I want to tell you about the first post office that Dunwoody had. That is, in my memory, the first one I remember, you remember, well, the house still stands where Myra Cheek Crook and her husband lived. It was brown at one time. I think it's white now. I noticed it came by today. Yeah, Mrs. Florence Brule, I understand, lives there. Well, the post office was back behind the train station and back from the Crook's house. I think it might have been, it wasn't much bigger than our corn crib down on the farm where we lived. But Miss Columbia Cheek, the sister, the maiden sister of Mr. J.U. Cheek, who owned the gin, was the postmistress. And my father, Thomas and Kirby, carried the mail from that point, the 26 miles around Sandy Springs and on down towards Buckhead and then back to Dunwoody. But this little post office where Miss Columbia Cheek sorted the mail, my daddy went up in his horse and buggy and hitched the horse to the fence post nearby and sorted and loaded his mail, and then he went around his route. It was a daylight to dark job. And in the wintertime, when it was so cold, Mama would put a brick in the fire and heat it good and hot, put it in the little thing you put your feet on, and when he came by with our house, he would get that and put it in his buggy so it'd stay warm part of the time. But he carries a mail about from somewhere between 1915 and 20 to his death in 1930. And before the end of his career, he was able to buy 2 model Ford. And then the route, the 26 miles of the rural route, was a lot shorter. He did not have to spend so much time on the road.
David or Glenn, there used to be 3 homes up here, 3 little houses. There are only one now. Where the flower shop is, right across from Bruno's. What were those
The
3
section